Good morning and welcome to the Point. This week, another look at a race that can impact how you're represented in Lansing. The 91st House District in Muskegon 2 years ago was a race between a Democratic challenger, Colleen Lamont, and a sitting Republican House member, Holly Hughes. The Democrat won, and this year it's just switched around. It's the Republican challenger, Hughes, taking on Lamont. We talked to both the Republican and the Democrat, and in the second half of the show, you'll hear from the independent candidate. But let's begin this morning with Democratic Representative Colleen Lamont. What is it that motivates you to want to do this again, given 2 years that I bet have been a pretty good learning curve for you?
It has been. I tell you, it's been a thrill and an honor to serve the people of Muskegon County in the 91st District. I'm so proud of the work that I've done. Everything from, developing the relationships with the organizations within my community, from my local chambers of commerce and working with businesses. Just a couple weeks ago, I was working with a new Greek yogurt company that's starting up in Norton Shores and helping them maneuver their way through our licensing and regulations here in Michigan to, get them opening on time and bringing almost 200 jobs to Muskegon County. All the people that I've worked with, going to, township and city council meetings on a regular basis so that they know that they've got their Lansing connection is me, and I'm going to help them. When there's legislation that comes up that affects them, I'll let them know about it. But more importantly, it's about the personal contact I've made with the people in my community. I have 4 coffee hours around the district on a regular basis, making sure that people know where I'm at, where they can come and sit down, have a cup of coffee with me and talk to me about the things that are most concerning them. But I don't wait for them to come to me. I'm also out there knocking on doors. Last year, I went out and I reached out to over 7,000 people in my district, whether it was knocking on their door over the summertime, spring and fall, or it was calling them on the phone when the weather was cold and I couldn't get out on the doors. But, making sure that I was there and available to hear the concerns that they have and know that there's someone that's out there listening to them.
You bring up something that we don't often talk about, but when I talk with legislators, I often talk about what you're doing in the chamber, what you're doing on a particular issue, what you're doing on a vote. As a total percentage of the things that you do, that's relatively small as a state representative, because most of what a representative does is what you were just explaining. It's back in the district, and you are in a district where I know that, like most districts in our state, jobs is a very important issue.
Absolutely.
And so when you work with a new company that you were just talking about, that means jobs. But what else is it as a state representative that you can do when it comes to getting people back to work?
Well, as I've been door to door and I hear the stories that people tell me, and it is about people talking about, I had a good job a few years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I was making decent money and I was able to support my family. Since then, I've lost my job because of the economic downturn, and the only thing that they can find is temporary work that's paying just above minimum wage. They can't support their families on this. They can't pay their bills on this. This is so important. They're not doing any different work than what they were doing before when they were making a good living, but now we've got low-wage jobs in our state. At this point, Michigan specifically has got the 3rd highest unemployment rate in the nation, and I think that we've got to do a much better job of actually attracting good-paying jobs here. The thing is that we've seen a lot of the tax burden get shifted onto the people who can least afford it. Seniors, taxing their retirement income. We've seen families, their per-child tax deduction being taken away. What we've done is we've effectively taken away the buying power of our middle class. I have been fighting to get that money back in their pockets, because I know that when they've got that money, they're actually going to be able to do with it what we want them to do with it. They're going to go and spend it in their local communities. They're going to help out their small businesses. They're going to create demand for product, which is what actually creates jobs in our state.
When you think about where Michigan is today versus where Michigan was, you can pick any point in time, but let's say 15 years ago.
Sure.
There was a time when the autos were super hot, selling lots of cars. We saw the economy go down here, then go down across the nation, and then we saw what happened to the autos, the subsequent bailout, back to where we are. Given that you believe we need to get more jobs, and I think that most of the 109 colleagues that you have in the House would agree with that, are we on a trajectory to do that, or are we going in the wrong direction?
Well, I think that we're not doing enough. I think that when we give tax breaks to businesses, we need to make sure that those tax breaks are actually tied to something that our state is going to benefit from. You know, a tax break for creating new jobs, a tax break for reinvesting in a company's workforce through better wages, more training, better benefits. These are all things that we haven't been doing, and I want to make sure that we need to make sure that our companies are doing right by our state, that they are creating jobs, and that they are paying people a good wage that people can actually go out and take care of their families on.
When you came into the legislature, you are like so many new members. You came with a certain skill set to which you've certainly added over the past 2 years, but very much based in education. You were still giving final tests while you were getting ready to take office.
Absolutely.
If I remember. So, what have you been able to translate from that previous work experience to this representative form of government in Lansing?
Well, you know, when I became a teacher, it was about public service. I wanted to, you know, touch kids' lives and get them on a path of lifelong learning. And as I saw my ability to do that as a teacher diminish because of decisions being made outside of my control in Lansing, I said, I've got to do something bigger than this. So I said, I'm going to run for office. The skills that I have as a teacher is all about developing relationships with the students in my classroom. And I'm still using that. I use that to develop relationships with the people in Lansing, whether it's my colleagues that are on both sides of the aisle, or it's the lobbyists that I need to work with, the community groups that I touch base with back home, and the people that I meet door to door. It's developing those relationships and letting people know this is where I stand, this is what I'm going to do for you, these are the things that I think are important, and how can I help you? And it's about asking people and listening to them about the things that they think are important and what we should be doing better here in our state.
There are more than a few Republicans and more than a few Democrats who get along just fine. Yet, when it comes down to those contentious issues, we see a lot of party divide. And I guess my question is, for you, as someone who's been through this for 2 years, did that kind of partisan divide surprise you? And is that because members are that clearly divided, or does it have a broader implication? Because when I see these members all working together and they talk about bipartisanship, and it works on some of the less contentious things, but when it gets to the big stuff, the R's and D's, you can pretty much draw a line right down the middle.
Right, and it's unfortunate, you know, and it did surprise me, and I suppose it shouldn't have, you know, seen how it works at the federal level, and you know, our state is a microcosm of what happens nationally. But we do see that sometimes I think our parties get too siloed and we don't talk enough to each other. I am more than willing, and I've told this to so many people in my community, I am more than willing to work with anyone on any issue. And when I took my oath of office, it was about raising my hand to represent every one of the people within my community in the state of Michigan. It wasn't about the people that only voted for me. It wasn't about my own party. It's about representing everyone. And if it means I disagree with my party on an issue because I know it's what's best for our state and for my own community, then that's what I'm going to do. But we have got to get past the partisan politics that happens too often in Lansing.
One of those areas in which partisan politics showed kind of the divide, if you will, was when it came to road funding this past year, something that has not yet fully been dealt with. The House did come up with a plan that would have put some money back into that road funding that the governor had asked for, but only half or probably a little less.
Right.
The Senate didn't act on it, so it really doesn't matter from that perspective unless or until both chambers come up with something. That doesn't seem like something that's likely to happen before an election, is it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that what we saw was a breakdown in the Senate because of the fact that there was an election that they had to go home and face their voters with. And unfortunately, we need people in office who are willing to stand up, make the tough choices and the good decisions that need to be made, and be willing to go home to their voters and explain it. And too often, it's too easy to say, well, that issue is just too controversial, I'm not going to touch it because I've got to go home and get reelected.
Republican Holly Hughes wants a rematch, and she'll have it in November. She tells us why she wants your vote. Why, after serving in the House, do you want to do this again, understanding both the ups and the downside of it?
Yes. Well, it's hometown. That's what it's really all about. I'm fourth generation Muskegon County, and it's all about jobs so our kids and grandkids can stay here. And if I'm so lucky to get grandchildren someday, my kids are the 5th generation, it would be the 6th generation here. And you need those jobs to get everything you need to do and want. Without jobs, they're going to look elsewhere and they'll go to other states. We don't need that. So that's part of the reason I also worked on the Veterans Job Fair that we started 3 years ago. We continue that to this day, and in May we had 95 businesses for our Veterans Job Fair. A third of them were veterans and the rest were non-veterans looking for work with 95 companies. That was a huge, huge job fair. So it's still all about jobs. My legislation when I worked on it was about jobs as well. The commercial driver's license for our veterans to transition them back was very important that the governor signed. I continued with that even after I was in private life, so to speak, again. I went to my colleagues and asked for some jobs bills for our veterans. We have 100,000 coming back, actually more than that coming back, and we need to transition them in faster, working faster, so they don't become a part of the statistics of unemployment. So Senator Molinar had a 20 jobs package bill. Senator Judy Emmons, one of my former roommates, had a jobs bill for our Vietnam veterans, Representative Rendon, and so forth. And so I still have those connections, still have their cell phone numbers, they still take my calls, and they know when I come in with a jobs bill that this is really something important to work on. And Representative Stamas, who is our House Floor Leader, has taken on some of my old bills as his personal bills as well. So jobs is the key to keeping our kids and our neighbors and our friends working in Muskegon County, and that's what I care about most, is my hometown, and getting them to work and making sure we're a viable, growing place.
When you look at Muskegon County compared to the surrounding area, are the right things in place here to take advantage of job growth, job development, if Michigan's economy gets better? Some would suggest it has gotten better up to this point, but I don't think anybody would suggest we are where we need to be.
No, we're not where we need to be. That's why we need more work, for sure. But vocational education is important. I think we have great schools here in Muskegon County, and we need to build upon that. I had Promise Zone legislation, Muskegon Promise Zone legislation that passed. In fact, I was put on the Promise Zone board at the ISD by Speaker Jace Bolger this year. We're working on a public program for that right now behind the scenes, which will help kids who are smart enough to go to college and just do not have the means. After the Pell and TIP grants, this would fill in the gap. And we're very fortunate as only 10 communities across the state that has that. Besides the Kalamazoo Promise, of course, this was kind of fashioned after that. So we'll launch into probably 2 years of fundraising, private fundraising first, but the legislation that I had cleaned up the legislation that actually Senator Van Werkum started, I worked on, and also Senator Hansen worked on as well.
When you talk about vocational training, that is one area where you see pretty good paying jobs that don't require necessarily a 4-year degree, yet many of them are open because people don't have those skills.
And actually those jobs, those voc ed jobs, may pay more than a lawyer gets. And you'll see Lieutenant Governor Calley talking about those kinds of things as well. The Michigan business leaders, also the folks that were at our job fair, the 95 businesses that were at our job fair in May, we're talking about the skills that we still need here, engineering, welders, etc. There's a whole gamut of what would help with vocational education actually to move our economy forward in Michigan. And in fact, my Promise Zone legislation added voc education into that, because I think it needed to be updated to what our real needs are here in Michigan for jobs.
On one hand, you talk about creating jobs, and people, particularly Republicans, like to talk about when you create jobs, you expand the economy of the state. The state has more funds without raising taxes. That's kind of the narrative that we've heard for the past 30 years. But here is a potential problem to that narrative, is that it's not likely that jobs will expand quickly enough to meet the governor's request to fix roads. $1.2, $1.5 billion, depending on who you talk to, over 10 years. After a while, you're talking real money, about $15 billion, perhaps as much as that. How do you get there if you are successful in November? Is Is that a direction? I know that the House came up with a plan that got partway there, but some say half, I say a little less than half probably of where the governor wants to go. First of all, do you think the governor's number is close to right? And if it is, how do you get there?
Oh, actually, I think it is close to right. The other factor that is in there is that we did road repair 10 years prior to Snyder getting in, and so that included the last administration, but it wasn't paid for, it was done on credit. So not only do we have to do the repairs that we have set forward, but we also have to pay for our past debt. And we did a lot of that in the legislature, cutting our office budgets. We took a pay cut personally, and so, and also with health insurance, we took cuts with that as well. But this problem with roads has to be addressed. I have a book at home that shows the different bridges and so forth that could be in danger to the public, and we just can't have an accident happen and then go back afterwards and fix it. We need to make sure people are safe and it's economical. So it's going to be a tough decision on them. I do believe that they will finish up this fall on whatever decision that they come up with.
Is that decision, and I appreciate the fact, as I have said many times, I think it happens this fall. It happens in the first 2 weeks in December. It's going to happen in lame duck. I mean, that's, if taxes are going to be raised, and it occurs to me as an observer that you can't do all of this by cutting out of the existing budget. Do you have a thought on that? I mean, you know what some of the proposals have been. Raise the gas tax in what some say is a precipitous matter. Others say, oh, you can cut within the existing budget, which seems somewhat difficult when you're only talking about a budget. People say a $50 billion budget, but it's not $50 billion that you get to deal with roads. It's between $10 and $12 billion that you get to deal with out of the general fund. Does that mean more revenues?
Well, we'll see how that works out with them. They've actually been able to increase the revenues, as you said, in the House to make a difference, and it's going to be added onto. As we've gotten better in the economy, they were able to add more money than originally thought that they could. So, but eventually they're going to have to figure out if they go in the wholesale or look deeper into the budget. So we'll see how it all comes out this fall.
What beyond jobs, and obviously this whole idea of infrastructure will be perhaps partially dealt with, and if you prevail in November, there will still be some questions about infrastructure to be sure come January. But if those two things are things that you're already working on, what else is it that you would like to do if you got a chance to return to the legislature?
Well, it's still about jobs. It has never departed from that. I will still concentrate on legislation to help transition not only our veterans, but our regular folks with vocational education programs to fit the jobs that are actually there. We had the lieutenant governor in a couple weeks ago. He was talking about 70,000 jobs that we have across the state of Michigan that don't match the skill set. If we could match the skill sets together, those 70,000 jobs would not go along empty. And many at our job fair said too, I have 20 jobs, but I can't find them with the skill set that I need. We need to match that up a whole lot better. And I know they're going to focus on that. We need to focus on that so that the jobs that we have in Michigan, we can fill those and make a difference for Michigan and give our manufacturers and so forth the folks that they need to keep their companies going.
Democrat Lamonte and Republican Hughes aren't alone. There is an independent running. He'll talk to us about why he wants your vote. That's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. You've heard from the Republican and Democrat running in the 91st District, and there is an independent too. Alan Jaeger is running, and he talked to us about why he decided to get into the race. All right, let's start with the premise where I start with everybody. Why did you decide to run for this office?
Well, I'm a big believer that both parties have been bought and paid for, and it's time that we put the people, the middle class, back in charge of this country. We're losing all the voters, are quitting, and we just need, the greed trying to get to these jobs has gotten so bad that no longer do I feel like the politicians are voting for the people.
You have served public office before, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, I was a county commissioner.
And you then considered yourself a Republican, is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, but now you've decided to run as an independent, as obviously for part of the reason you just stated. How do you approach a campaign like this when you know both the Republicans and Democrats are very interested in what has been, over historically, a competitive seat?
Well, I think first off, it's very hard to get the message out that you're different than these other two. And through media like this, it helps. I think what we have to do so is it's more about sending the message that we no longer want our government paid for. We want to have back to where the people control us, and or we control them. I don't think we're just spending so much time with them trying to control us that we need to get away from it. And I don't know how to get all the message out, what I believe in or anything else, but I do know that we have to change the direction we're going.
Give me an example of something that you would like to see changed at the Lansing level, something that's going on there that you think is not represented.
Well, I think that we could get rid of a lot of the departments. That's where I would go. I think we got so much overhead now, we no longer can make businesses work. We can't get through the paperwork. I own a business that we used to have around 20 employees. We're down to just the original owners again, because it's not worth it for us to have employees because we can't get through the work. We need to get rid of regulation desperately. Our schools need it done, and our certainly our townships, our cities, everybody.
Well, when you talk about that, and I'm not going to ask for to boil it all the way down, but do you have a general area of a department that you think that could be eliminated?
Well, I don't know that it can be eliminated, but the Department of Education should take a real big hit. The Department of Transportation take a giant hit. I think there are just department after department that are just spending money. Some departments are going to be hard to hit because you cannot just cut people all at one time. But other departments I think we could start on and put the control back in the people's hands.
Well, let me ask you then about this specifically. You said the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation right now is already saying that they are $1 billion plus a year short in money that they need to repair infrastructure, roads, bridges, and that type of thing. One of the biggest complaints that we have heard from people running for office, and they say that they have heard from people that they've talked to as voters, are the roads in Michigan. So if you were to cut the Department of Transportation, how would you deal with roads?
Well, I would just cut administration. Over in Muskegon, we have 50 people working probably in one building that works for MDOT. Our forefathers were building better roads without them. We were just, now we're using either it's the recycled materials or it's we respect the wrong materials or whatever, and I think that was probably paid for by lobbyists to use certain stuff, and now it's destroying our roads. We're not building the roads with the quality that we used to. Apple Avenue is now getting rebuilt every 5 years. Holton Road every 5 years. Our parents didn't build roads that only lasted 5 years, and so the thing is we have people right in Muskegon County that can do this. Instead of having all these people, we could fix a lot of roads with 50 employees gone.
What do you say to folks as you're going out? Are you going door to door? Are you going out and making contact? Because you say, as an independent, it's hard to get your message out. How do you go about that?
Well, I go door to door the best I can and pay for advertising, but this whole thing comes out of my wallet. It doesn't come, I don't get the donation from the parties, so it's tough. I mean, there is no good way. And this year our company is busier than it has been in 5 years, and which makes it even harder for me to get out there. But I'm just doing the best I can with all the resources and friends and Facebook and whatever,
Well, if you had, and you do right now, about 30 seconds to make a pitch to people in the 91st District, why would you tell them to vote for you as they move into this November general election?
Well, because I believe in smaller government. The only way we're going to get jobs back in this country is when we start cutting regulations. No one has enough money to start an entrepreneurship anymore. We need to have it where we can afford to, just with an old dump truck or with a lawnmower, to go out and start a business. But we have regulated us so bad, we no longer can do that. And we need jobs. It would solve violence problems. It would solve so many things that people can get back to work. And I think jobs is just key to it, and getting rid of regulation.
We're back with more To the Point in just a moment. Of course, there are a lot of big races between now and November. The state conventions just this past weekend have finally set the entire slate. We'll be talking about that and more every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock when you join us on Wood TV 8 for To the Point.